Diane Abbott.
The Minister will be aware that recommendation 4 of her report is that the government wishes to bridge divides and create partnerships between the police and communities. Will the Minister explain how she thinks strip searching black schoolgirls helps to bridge the divide between the police and communities? And is she aware that this is not an isolated incident? The Metropolitan Police's own figures show that in 2020 to 2021, 25 young people under 18 were strip searched. Most of those were black or ethnic minorities, 60% were black, the rest were some kind of minority ethnic, and only 2 of those 25 children that were strip searched was actually white. Is the Minister aware of how degrading this strip search was? It wasn't that she was just stripped naked. They made her part the cheeks of her bottom and cough. She was on her period. I could give more detail, but I don't want to distress people in this house. It was utterly degrading. She is still traumatised. I have to stress. They found no drugs. She's never been accused of taking drugs. How can the Minister sit there and tell this house that that had nothing to do with that young girl's race?
What has been going on for our girls?
So this was kept under wraps for 2 years before it leaked out. Where I was supposed to feel safe took me away from people who were supposed to protect me and stripped me naked while I was on my period.
When something happened, he must say, "Great Scott!"
Organize, sit down, reason and talk.
Welcome to another ORT. Kwaba, welcome Black. Where the panelists and I have the vexing situation of Child Q on our hands to discuss.
Yeah. So today we're gonna go straight into Child Q. And we're coming from the perspective of shock. You know, this thing about us as a community. I don't know. Hey, brother S, you're a film buff, you know, so you're supposed to know Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce. Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce.
Of course I do. Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
Sherlock Holmes.
Listen, man. Get the man. Look here. So anyway, Sherlock Holmes. I like that Sherlock Holmes, man. When I watch it on YouTube, because him have this saying, you know, when something happen, he must say, "Great Scott!" And but Sherlock Holmes expect the thing what surprise Watson, you know.
Watson.
Yeah, him already anticipated. So you now go hear Sherlock Holmes say, "Great Scott!" You only hear Watson say. And it you know, this whole Child Q thing, it just have this Great Scott thing about, it's like we are Watson. We are Watson, you know, because every time something happens to one of our children or a black person who is interfacing with the authorities, we have this Great Scott. And I'm saying, how can we be more like Sherlock Holmes and anticipate it?
Very true. Can I ask, have the liberty of doing something before we get into the crux of this discussion? Can I take the opportunity to bring Child Q's voice at the very start of our discussion? And as we all know, there was a review, and as part of that review, she was obviously spoken to. And there were just some excerpts from her statement that I'd like to start off with.
Yes, man, feel free, man.
Yeah, please. The center of. Okay. And these are her. This is her voice from the review, as I said. Okay. The Child Q says, "Someone walked into the school where I was supposed to feel safe, took me away from people who were supposed to protect me, and stripped me naked while I was on my period. On top of that, on top of preparing for the most important exams of my life, I can't go a single day without wanting to scream, shout, cry, or just give up. I feel like I'm locked in a box, and no one can see or cares that I just want to go back to feeling safe again. My box is collapsing around me, and no one wants to help. I don't know if I'm going to feel normal again. I don't know how long it will take to repair my box, but I do know this can't happen to anyone ever again. All the people that allowed this to happen need to be held responsible. I was held responsible for a smell. But I am just a child. The main thing is I need space and time to understand what has happened to me and exactly how I feel about it, and getting past this exam season. I need to know that the people who have done this to me can't do it to anyone else ever again. In fact, so no one else can do this to any other child. Things need to change with all organisations involved. Even I can see that.
Thank you.
Powerful stuff. Powerful
Yes.
stuff, Denise.
And within that, there were a few points that I wanted us to talk about today. One is about this phrase that gets repeated, not just with matters of racial injustice, but with crimes per se. I don't want it to happen again. I don't want somebody else to go through it. And this idea of safety in these institutions, I wanted us to be able to look at those 2 points where we were discussing it. And it's not solely about child Q, even though we'll be talking about that, but it's more about how does the community use their previous or our previous experience to inform our next step. As Einstein says, if you continue to do something in the same way and expect a different result, then that's a form of madness. So, is there something as a community that we can do away from becoming emotionalized when something that is hurtful happens to one of our colleagues or children?
Okay. Just on that, there's a lot in there, Push. And for me, it is child Q, but it's so much wider than child Q. Because, number one, we hear that this was one, and there were about 21 other situations in which this happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it's by no means an isolated incident. Secondly, it was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this was kept under wraps for 2 years before it leaked out. And only after it leaked out that any kind of action was taken against the officers involved. And thirdly, this involves an academy, right? And I can tell you from my own dealings with academies, they write their own script. They seem to be a law unto themselves, and our children are particularly coming under the cosh from a lot of these academies.
Yeah.
Right. So taking those three things into account, I totally agree with you when, the oh my gosh, that reaction. Because there's been all kinds of things happening in these academies when it comes to our children. And the fact that it was hushed up for 2 years tells me that there's some kind of collaboration between the police and the school or the education department, whoever, went to great lengths to keep this under wraps. Now, I think we've reached a point where I'm not going to take away anybody's anger or tears or pain or protest if that's the way that people feel that they need to vent. But get that out by all means. But we have to now get smart. And the only way forward is to litigate. Even if we become vexatious litigants, right, and litigate every slight against our children should result in some kind of legal process to follow. Because if that was my child, right, if that happened, say, on Tuesday afternoon, right, Wednesday morning, I'm calling in sick to work, I'm going straight to the nearest solicitor. I'm not phoning the school, I'm not making a formal complaint, I'm going straight to a solicitor. And I want that letter needs to land not on the head teacher's desk, on the director of education. We need to be litigating and going for the person at the top, because only then does it trickle down. We don't want complaint procedures and, internal inquiries where they can get their stories straight and shred any incriminating documents. We need to aim higher than that and start to become a real nuisance, right? Because there's a difference between when people fear legal action, they tend to act differently. And I think that's the area where we now need to focus our attention. And maybe we've got a lot of us who are in the legal profession who maybe will take on some of these cases in the community on a no-win, no-fee basis, or they might know of firms who might. But we need to really start galvanizing that side of things now, circulating that information. Maybe we need to get smart with GoFundMe to help people pay for it. But that, to me, now is the direction that we need to go. We should be upset, but now we need to start being thoughtful.
I totally agree with Kindred. And, okay, it's happened time and time again, and I think we've had a few afterwards. What I'd like to ask us as a panel, and perhaps the community can ask themselves this as well. How many of us have read that review to look at Child Q's voice? Has any of us read it?
No, I didn't. I never see it, and I never read it.
I haven't read it, did I?
And I haven't read it.
Okay, and there lies part of the problem, okay? Because what happens is when these things do come to light, it can be argued that we are emotionally protesting. Because we're out there on what we feel emotionally, not what we've read, not what we understand. We're not out there with power, okay? Because that dies down, it's quiet again, and there's nothing else. There is no pursuance of anything in the main. Because knowledge is power, right? And in the absence of knowing in detail through reading this review, and then I'm talking about retrospectively in regards to Child Q, and this can be said for many of the other instances that have happened. Yeah, in the absence of knowing in detail what they did, how, when, where, who was there or under which blanket they are attempting to cover themselves to justify their behaviour. They're essentially toothless lions. We're out there on emotion. We can't go any further than that because we don't have any detail to challenge. We don't have any knowledge of what happened, regardless, that they're unlikely to be truthful or transparent. We've got nothing go and fight with and protest with and challenge. We don't know details of any potential laws broken to go and see this solicitor and what have you. We've got nothing to demand prosecutions for, privately pursue matters, or to make collective challenges to the school individually. In this instance, where there's the headmistress who was heading the school at that time, she has resigned. Now that shouldn't be a get out of jail card. We should be in a position where you have enough knowledge of what's happened that you can pursue something to her in regards to her, as I said, as an individual, collectively, the education board, and what have you. We are really just emotional protesters, and we really need to get into the core of what is happening.
So we need to be. Let me tease out something now. So you're saying, if you don't read the report, you're more likely just to be responding from emotion.
Yes, because you've been fed by what the media is telling you. What are we out? We may get as far if it was my child. And that's helpful to be out there in numbers, but it's far more helpful if we're out there in numbers, but we're also out there with knowledge and we know which direction, and we're pursuing things down the by the law as well. We can challenge Parliament and things like that. But we're not really putting ourselves in a position where we can do, or we're ready to do any more than just protest.
No, I think that's a very good point, about being informed. However, I would suspect that there are people out there who say, I don't need to read no report. These people are just racist. No report. I don't need me. And part of what you're saying is some kind of redress. But people might be at the stage where they say, I don't want, prosecutions and kind of getting some redress is important. But by now, we should have our own schools.
Oh, that's without question.
We don't need to read. We don't need to keep on reading reports and getting caught in the minute. This may be part of the argument that somebody has.
But we could be saying for the next 5-10 years, we should have our own schools. We should have our own schools. We haven't, and while we haven't, and to our children, we have to be ready to pursue vigorously.
Fair enough.
Knowledge, not just emotionally. or else it just goes by the by and nobody's held responsible, and our children continually. I mean, what happened to child Q is essentially adultification of child Q, and it's rooted in slavery. I don't want to go down that road, but it's adultification. Everything that happens, we can't just allow it to happen. And we can understand, we can build our schools and go down that line, but hold people accountable for what these things are happening to our children.
I'll get to about hold people accountable. In the defense of some of the persons who turned up to the march, there were people who had read the report and were giving some of the details which you advised about. My mindset and the greater question is, how many more before we actually can start to organize and do something different? We know that the schools don't like it. From the 60s, we know that. And yes, we will get some redress and all the rest of it, but when do we use our experiential knowledge to organize in a different way? Especially now that we have this mystical thing called a black middle class. You know, when do we organize and create environments where children are educated, especially in this post-COVID world where they're entertaining a kind of hybrid model? You don't always have to physically be in some place to carry out the task. I mean, I don't necessarily sense as a community. I sense that we feel let down. I sense that we feel picked on and marginalized, but I don't really get an appetite that we want some kind of facilities for our own, where we're going in there, we're paying for it, and we're respected for being members of the community that we serve.
Because we're not demanding that. It takes me back to, in my view, it takes me back to what I said at the beginning. We're emotional protesters.
Okay.
We feel hard done by. We feel it's not unfair. It's unfair. We feel. Yeah. Knowledge is power. We need to galvanize. We need to be knowledgeable of how their system works, to use that same system against them, and empower ourselves that we can demand more.
Yeah. I agree with that, but I also think it's about being able to visualize what that might look like as well. And if you're constantly on the defensive and trying to fight fires, you don't have the headspace to think about, okay, what would I see as a viable alternative? What might that look like? So if I get rid of that, what do I want to? And that's the conversation that we need to be having more. How can we actually piece this together and present ourselves and each other with something that we can see as being workable and different from what is being dished up to our children right now? I think it's that next bit.
Lacking vision.
But I can visualize we can visualize, but it can be a fantasy if we're only visualizing what we want. If we're not looking also at the system, how the system works, how the system is used against us, then our visualization becomes fantasy, because we have to know what we're dealing with.
Absolutely. It's not an either or, because even if we could visualize it, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next year. We have to survive in the meantime. And these people, there has to be pushback on these people. And if it means that we tie them up in knots legally and keep them busy that way, then that's what we have to do.
I agree. And I think here, coming into that point, there's been some really good points made by all of us so far. And I had some things previously written down here about the question of child Q, and between Sister Ebony and Sister Kindred, they kind of summed it up for me. But in a nutshell, I had said, one of the things in terms of action that we could do, I had written here, parents to sue everybody, right? Yeah. And to using the American model. So that was touched upon. Litigation, absolutely. And the outcome of which will hopefully help some people to see that this is a precedent, and if it's set and if it does go the whole way, and if people are held accountable and punished accordingly, then people may develop some more faith in the system, because we're all out of faith of the system. We don't trust the system. The system has not given us much room to be trusting on many experiences to be trusting of it. So, but at the same time, we know that we're going to still need to use some of it in order to demand the changes that Sister Ebony has touched upon today, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a really valid point about us being prone to emotional responses.
Yeah.
And I felt that. I tell you what, I went kind of quiet and my eyes got glassy as you read so eloquently the excerpt from Charles Q. And I kind of regressed and became 15 and thinking like, wow, like wow, what was going on for that girl? What has been going on for our girls who are that age? What's been going on for our boys when they found themselves in places with adults where the adults have told them that this is wagwan, this is what we expect of you, and the child is completely powerless. And the trauma that is unsaid, that child is unable to say, and actually, even if it turns out that the adults concerned say, all right, well, we don't have to proceed with this any further, that we don't take into account, oh, hang on a minute, you can't just do that. You've already left this. Who's going to sort out the child's trauma? Right? Just because they said, oh, well, we made an error, we're sorry about that. No, somebody needs to address the trauma. Otherwise, you have yet another example of another black child who feels that injustice is being served, their family feel injustice is being served, the community feels the injustice is being served, and what we tend to do is exactly that thing that you're saying that we ought not to, and to be mindful that we don't, is that we go out and say, let's burn down the place. Because we see that doesn't work. Right?
But I just wanted to just follow on something you said there now. Because yes, I agree with litigation and all the rest of it. But let's face some of the facts. America is a litigation society, and some of the world's excesses of police brutality and treatment in schools and all the rest of it. But going back to the other thing I wanted to say about litigation is it may benefit the family. But how can we use our knowledge? Like I said, this has been going on for 40 years, if not more, when you talk about education. And we're still sending children to schools and under the expectation that they'll be safe there. It just beggars belief that we don't have an appetite to create a different environment built on 40 or 50 odd years or even probably more, of seeing that some of these people can't change. And to make it worse, I'm sure there's black staff in the same school over that 2-year period where they keep their mouth locked.
Yeah. So, having champions in our community, for instance, that can go into, because again, it's going to be about accessibility, right? Let's say, for instance, it's a valid point you make about black schools, but that's not the panacea. That's not going to be the be all and end all. You're going to have a number of black people who are going to say, well, no, because it's a good idea in principle, but I don't want to be separatist, and I don't want my children, I want my children to be inclusive, and we live in Britain, and I want them to have this, this experience of inclusivity.
We already have a separatist system when you have religious schools and private schools, so.
But yes, but the get out clause for those faith schools is that they will tell you, and it works. If you're non-faith and you apply to that school, you can get in. So although it's set up for their own, they can't stop anybody else. And I'm saying, if we had all black schools, the principle would be the same. I would agree. If we had all black schools, if some white people or families wanted their children to come to that school, I'd say come, because you need to come. But it's not for you, and that's what those faith schools are saying. You can come if you want, but it's not for you, and you will have to adhere to the curriculum.
You have to get some dumpling.
Right. So there's that, but there's also this thing about how we, in our pain, collectively can empower ourselves enough to challenge the system in a way that does affect change without us just burning down the building and protesting with the placards outside the courthouse. because they don't know that's how we're going to come, and they're ready for that.
Yeah.
And after a few weeks or a few months, the protesting dissipates and it disappears into legal jargon that we've no idea. And then all 2 years later, look how long they sat on this thing for 2 years. 2 years later, we've long forgotten about it, and then there's a paper.
Yeah. So, but what's happened? I'm not saying burn down the schools. You know what I'm saying is, you have people in this country now. You know, the first generations who were born here, who have a lot of experience of the institutions here. Now, sometimes the younger generations look at those older generations and think, "You failed us. You never provided an alternative." As a matter of fact, most of you are pressuring us to go to school. You're pushing education. You're pushing us on these people. No, look, you have child queue happening. We have other incidents happening with them, a search of children and all kind of stuff. But you already knew. So there's a question for me about, well, what does that experience mean when you're actually possibly denying some behaviors which you know still exist?
You have to say part of that again there.
Okay.
We lost you.
Yeah, I think that's the last part.
Yeah. So I'm saying, what is the value of having those experiences of being let down by institutions of various descriptions, only to reinforce to your children to take part in those institutions, and we've not provided them with an alternative?
Could it be that I think part of that is not, those teachers or the adults or us who's been aware or know of multiple violations like this. Perhaps is it that we're not looking enough at our alternatives. No, the door.
Yeah. Sorry.
We're not.
We're live.
You know.
We're not looking enough at our alternatives, or maybe don't know enough about our alternatives.
Okay.
Get the beginning. Knowledge is power.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about your local classified newspapers and things. How many of us look in the back of that newspaper to see what changes are coming to that history or to the local community and what have you? Not many of us do, but yet we're surprised. Good gosh, we're surprised that there's a no bookie shop open up, or do so and so shop, or they've raised their stately homes to the ground and put them in a block of flats or what have you. We're all surprised because many of us we don't enough explore. We're not curious enough to go and have a look at further than our phones, or to look deeper and get past the emotion and have a look at, okay, what can we do? What can we actively do? Figuratively, not emotionally. What can we do to make things happen? We're not curious enough. We're not looking for the information enough. We're not seeking the knowledge enough. So we're not armed to do anything different than we have been doing decade after decade after decade. And those that encourage the children to go to school and what have you, it's a case of let's try and make the best of what we've got.
This is ORT.
ORT. This show is sponsored by Sunrise Organic CMOS. Who say can drink sunshine?
Today's the day
The herbs is the healing of the nation, brothers and sisters. Hey, this is your brother, twin brothers from the Royal Maroon Herbs, 48 Ride Lane, Peckham.
I dare your feet come, hold me down.
For your healing, brothers and sisters out there, we have a comprehensive list of herbs. You can find your sarsaparilla, you can find your sea moss, you can find your brother rock, you can find your moringa. So what's up, leaf, guinea and weed? So come to the Royal Maroon Herb Shop, 48 Ride Lane, Peckham. The herbs is the healing of the nation, brothers and sisters.
Today's the day I give thanks. I am here.
This is Solomon from Black Child Promotions, one of the UK's best black book distributors, and we operate across London. Come check us out. You can also check us out on Instagram at Black Child Promotions and Facebook Black Child Space Promotion. Peace, family.
ORT, we do it cause we love you.
What is a school for?
Thank you.
What is a school actually for? Because let's say that we have managed to pull together the funds, we've found the building or whatever, and we have created the first school, the lines of what Chris is describing. And then you get 2 police officers who rock up at that school saying that they've just spotted one of the pupils who walk past them, smelling of whatever. They want to come in and stick that pupil. Right, now, this is a black school with black staff. Okay. What's going to be different? Are we going to be sufficiently confident, informed, assertive enough to say to them, no, you're not coming in there. You don't do that here. That's not how we operate. It's not enough to have the black. There has to be a kind of, a grassroots rethink about what education is for. Because
without a doubt.
This would not have, to my knowledge, this would not have happened in the school that I went to. This kind of nonsense would be happening in the police station, but it wouldn't have happened in my actual school, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And I'm not aware, growing up, of any other school in which this happened. Okay, this happened on the school premises, right? Now, had this girl been hauled off to the police station if they did this, didn't inform her parents or her family, I'd be looking at it one way. But those officers went into that school and did this, and the school allowed this to happen.
Them a work together, man. Them a work together.
Yeah, the school and the police in bed together allowed this violation of not just this girl, but of the 20 odd others that this happened to.
Yeah.
So what are we saying? What is the role of a school? Where's the safeguarding, and what is the role of the school? Because it's not enough to just have a black school if we're going to follow the same types of protocols that are in place. It has to be a completely different philosophy that governs any school that we manage to fund and put together.
I just want to open up that question to the listeners in the comments section. We welcome your views on what you think a school, a black school or African-centered school should be about. Yes, Ebony.
Yeah, I was going to say, the thing is, that school failed that child, okay?
Absolutely.
On the individual basis of that school, okay? What we understand the role and the purpose of a school is correct. That school failed that child because they have dominion over their school, okay? They have a role to fulfill. The child didn't commit a crime, and the police do not have overarching rights to come and do what they did there. They failed that child, and they failed to safeguard that child by not being present, by not, boundarying how much the school should do. First and foremost, not informing the parent or ensuring that a responsible adult was present. Let me give you an example, okay? An individual is in hospital, and perhaps a doctor is administrating some treatment that is really painful, and the patient is uncomfortable, and it's not life-threatening, but it's really visibly uncomfortable. I've observed a nurse put a stop to that right away and say, no, my patient is feeling pain. It's too much. Stop now. Okay? So that nurse has stepped in a way that the school should have stepped in and said, no, this cannot happen here. Okay? She hasn't committed a crime. I don't permit. I don't allow it. Yeah? So that school didn't do that. And they should have done that. Okay? So they didn't work within what they should have done to safeguard and protect, and within the role of the school. They didn't do that.
But isn't that still working on what we expect of them as opposed to what we know of them?
Look, I think that when we hold the example that was given there, we're thinking about, let's say it had been a black school. Let's continue to use that supposition. If you look at the faith schools that currently exist now, most of them have security at the gate.
Yeah.
So there's a number of hoops that the police would have to jump through in order even just to access the school. And at each point of call, there should be somebody, well, it should have been the safeguarding lead, the designated safeguarding lead, who inquired with the police as to why, and informed the police why it was that they were requested to come near. And then the whole protocol process is transparent.
Yeah.
It's not hidden. None of the staff should be saying, the school staff should be saying, we don't know it. Because they will all be trained in it, but they will have designated safeguarding leads. So, given that they jump through all of these hoops, and yet instead of somebody like your nurse, for example, saying, no, I'm going to take over here, my patient, the patient is saying, we're going to stop. It appears more like, and certainly within the other 20 cases, that the school mentality became almost like a gang mentality. That because somebody in the school had said, we think that this child is, therefore the school assumed the teacher or the teaching staff must be right and will follow this whole process through.
Of course.
But that meant that they did that in spite and despite of the safeguarding process that they should have followed. It means that they tore that up and just followed this teaching staff assumption and allowed for the police to go in there and brutalize, assault this young girl, and violate. I mean, there's all these terms.
But let me say something now. All of you are black professionals, and I know that once the police speak, everybody sides with the police.
Who said so? No,
listen, man.
Time with that.
I something when me say, I know not black professionals, professionals, school teacher, health visitor, them all go along with what the police have to say. If the police then come at your house last week and you'd have a spliff in your mouth, that is what they work with. So
I'm gonna beg
them can get any title they want, DSL, whatever they want. I know they're not going to chat. They would prefer to upset the child and family and community before taking a stance against the police.
Okay. Well, I've been in positions where the police and the police liaison officers have piped up and said they're going to be doing something, and in my capacity, I've let them know that's not going to happen.
Okay.
It's all right.
The reason why, but hold on, the reason why I'm saying that, when the police designate somebody as being a gang member or gang affiliated, there's very few people who question that title in the gang. They work with it.
Okay.
And maybe the school was in tandem with that diagnosis or that profiling.
I don't care.
I hear what you're saying, I'm just dealing with the reality of it, not my expectation, Because I can expect them to have fancy titles and follow protocol all I want. But the reason why these things don't work is because of an inherent bias. So we have to think we have to seriously think about not creating a black school for every child. But we must think about other facilities and other ways of educating our children, going back to what Kindred has said. What is education for? So give them an education and prepare them for the world, as opposed to stuffing them in these buildings where we know, even if it don't happen to the length of child queue, we know that the black children are being failed. We know that already,
We know that some of them are being failed, right? Not all of them.
I was failed. So we have 25%.
Okay.
Half of the panelists now, we have 25% already been failed.
Okay, all right. And it's a story. Listen, I ain't even going to joke about it. It's a story that many people, young people, could also concur with. They could relate to your story saying you was failed, right? Yeah. And that will persist. You're not going to have a foolproof system. And what I don't want is for us as black people to lose all faith in all schools. right?
You know something that would be fine. No, but hold on, no.
Hang on.
No, hold on. I just want to make this point. I think the approach is fine if we didn't have 5 black schools, but we don't have any. Even with all the years of experience, with them there.
We had
a school in Tottenham.
Yes.
We had or we have?
We did have that.
Okay. Do we have any though? Do we have options at this point?
No. And so that, of course, I don't want to be careless about this, and I'm not trying to be dismissive of it either.
Yeah.
But I think that Ebony made a really good point, so did Kindred, about what do we do in the meantime. So it's all well and good of saying, right? Yeah. Let's start the black school route. Let's do the black schools. Come on, let's do the black schools. Well, until we finance them and find them and build them and train people to teach them, and then, right? Until such time, we still need to be protecting our child's views. And with the systems that are in place, I think a review of many of those systems, a review of the safeguarding system that failed these children in these 20 odd occasions, that should be something that's done universally.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be for the schools, it should be nationwide. When we think about educating teaching staff about children's rights, educating the children about children's rights, educating parents about children's rights, we then can empower them. They can then feel that they can take that knowledge to the schools and hold the teaching staff accountable, hold the school, hold the establishment accountable. These are some things that we can enforce without having to bund the place down. And
are you keep on talk about bund the place? Nobody else not talk.
No. Hey, listen, remember.
Look here, and the school burned down, it's not me, Kindred, or Hebony,
No, but remember, I agreed that we tend to have emotional responses, and that was my gut feeling when Ebony read out the excerpt.
Okay.
I just wanted to just go and do something.
Yeah, man.
Right?
Yeah, man.
And I know that is
direct action.
That is descendants old. It is eras, epochs old, where when we feel this thing, we regress to this almost carnal response.
Yeah, man,
you know what?
Some primitive things come out in a way. That's true, man.
Right? I just got to go and just somebody. Let somebody come and say something to me. So we know we don't learn from that. It's not the right way to go about it. But we can't help that being
part of the experience.
Because enough of what we would like to have changed has not changed. And until we can experience sufficient enough change, we'll always have that. We'll always have that in our throat. We'll always see a thing where somebody just tips us over the edge and we regress back to that carnal feeling.
But that energy, if we can just harness that energy and start to really turn it into people power, because people power is something that should never be underestimated, and what we need to do is push back and give them more and more work to do, so that I'm not expecting anybody to stop doing anything because they wake up to the fact that it's wrong. But maybe they might stop doing it if it becomes too much hassle for them to do with the fallout. If you know that you're going to have to go through, a lengthy legal process every time one of these letters land, they're going to think twice.
Yeah.
So let's bombard them with the letters. Keep the plate spinning, and that will keep them out of mischief long, at least enough for our children to get through the system, safely enough for them to come out the other end. While we're
and I think it will. Yes, I agree, and I think it will be an ongoing reminder to them that you will be held accountable.
Yeah,
you will. We will hold you accountable, right? And you can see the test cases from the legal action that's being taken against other places. That's what we would want to show them, so that they're tentative. They become more tentative now and a bit more vigilant about, well, if we follow this thing through and we mess it up, there's going to be hell to pay.
Yeah.
Right? They need to feel that, and they need to feel that brush of air on the back of their neck that makes their hair stand up.
Yeah, 100%. We need to be ever present, don't we? And keep things in the public consciousness. I mean, because child Q, it's gone quiet. What's happening now? We don't know what's happening. And it'll go out of our consciousness, and, you know, another year later, something else will emerge and will react in the same way. But so we have to keep it ever present in a way that is active.
Yeah.
And aside from protests, and you know, I'm not saying, you know, let's get rid of those altogether, but, you know, let those happen as well, but keep the conscious there, keep us informed. What's happening next? You know, people that we need to know who are held responsible, or, you know, who are the pursuants, who are the litigators, and what we need to know what's happening and keep it, you know, and we need to educate children collectively, you know, in schools, in the community, and educate ourselves about the system, as I said, and be involved, be actively involved, you know. And I asked, did Child Q know her? Did she know the options available to her? Did she feel confident enough to insist that her parent or a teacher was present? You know,
no. No. She absolutely didn't, and that is the case with us. You know, anytime I'm thinking about the times that I was stopped by the police during the periods of stuff, right? My parents didn't know what their rights was, and it was likely that many of our parents, had we then got home safely and said and shared with them our experience of the police, it's highly probable that some of our parents would be saying, well, what was you doing that make the police have to stop you?
Yeah.
So rather than us feeling supported by them in their ignorance, both of the legal system and of our relationships as black young men and women with the police, they would blindly side with them.
Yeah.
And completely disconcerting.
But things isn't there a different situation now? Like I said, we have a black middle class, and surprisingly, a lot of them are in education, and they're not out on the streets demanding better. I just want to point that out, you know, that the people who are being paid to work in these schools, who come from the same communities, they aren't demanding better.
Well, they're not, but we're not making it tough on them any, you know. The more we start to push back, the more people like that are going to have to really start to think about which side they're on. But at the moment, they're not enough pressure to do that. And I think that Brother S's point is right about how our parents' generation responded, because they didn't know it. They hadn't come through those institutions themselves. So they were educated elsewhere. They didn't know how it operated. But we have come through those institutions. We know what it's like. You know, our generation, the stop and search, the stuff and all that, we know the reality. So maybe we need to be doing things like creating, you know, I think Ebony's point, maybe we need to start creating our own equivalent of something like Childline for our children.
Yeah, for real.
If you've been stop and search, or if somebody is full of something, let's give them the advice directly, let's give them the information that you can call, and let's start, because we know the reality, we know what they're up against. So we need to be arming them with the information that they need, and then if we can then support them to push back on it. And if we push hard enough and consistently enough, and with the knowledge and the information that Ebony was talking about, we can give them some hard work. We can make some hard work. Yeah.
Okay, we're coming to the end of the show, so I welcome any final thoughts on how we remove ourselves from being Watson in Sherlock Holmes and saying, "Great Scott!" every time something happens that we know what's going to happen.
Okay. One very practical one. Mm-hmm. If you haven't got one in your home already, everybody get a copy of PACE, the Police and Criminal Evidence, which is, I think it's on Amazon. You can get it, right? Have a copy of that in your house.
Yeah.
Say it again, please, sister. Say it again, please, sister.
The Police and Criminal Evidence Bill.
PACE.
That's the main legislation that they operate under. Get a copy of that and have it in your house.
Thank you.
There's a brother who told me once that whenever his son got arrested, he would go down the police station and he would carry it with him and make sure they see him with it. Yeah, and he's got like post-it notes in the different places. And the minute they saw him with that book, attitude change.
Them
He knows
them
what
back
better
straight,
than
them back straight up, and then call him sir. Yes, sir. Cup of tea. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's Ebony's point about the knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Half of the police on the street, they don't know what's in the bill, you know.
Of course, man.
They don't know the piece of legislation.
They don't need to. They're following orders.
Yeah.
Them hopes
Yeah.
of the person who order them know where man talk about.
There you go. But we can know. Or the bits of it that are relevant, most relevant to our children, we can have that. Have that in your house as a working tool.
Yeah. Thank you. Great suggestion. Brother S, Kindred. All right. Ebony?
I'm going to add to what Sister Kindred has said. I think that's a good piece of advice. I think while you take that tucked under your arm, go with the Columbo approach. Probe, question, pause, question. Yeah, be inquisitive. Okay, dig.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Oh.
Make people accountable.
And what about the cigar and the Mac?
Which Mac?
Columbo Mac.
I'm not yeah.
Yeah.
Take them back.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
this
not as smart, you know, as you really are. They think, okay.
Yeah, be forensic basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Make notes, names, numbers, time, date, everything. You know, with the view of generating a question to undermine.
Indeed. Timeline, record stuff, right? Let them know, right? It's not going to stop here. I'm not just going to come here and start telling you about your underneath, and then you're going to threaten me with arrest because I'm so upset that I can't articulate what I expect that you've done of my child. Because they know they have us like that. When they have us like that, all they do is, are you being aggressive? Are you resisting arrest? If you say that one more time, sir, I'm going to be left with this situation is untenable. Right, you're under arrest. And before you know it, you're like, hold on a minute, you guys just come down here just to tell something. So I think we need to arm ourselves with the knowledge, absolutely, but also to go in there and record and report stuff in a way that we're saying and timeline it. So, you know, get the names of these officers. What's your number? What's your name? Okay. And at what time did you do the da-ba-da-ba-da? Record it, report it. Ask them. You can ask them. Do that articulation in front of it. Record it and know that, you know, maybe the legal system might say after the fact, oh, well, some of that stuff's inadmissible. So what? What it will do is it will arm us with the power that there was an injustice. We don't just think there was. There absolutely was. And that's why we're going to go along the route of litigation. And we're going to make you pay financially. We're going to make you pay. Listen, we're going to just make you. You're going to pay for this. And hopefully some of that which they get paid for, we are able to help and offer support to our child to overcome their trauma.
Yeah, man. Change your attitude and the world will change in line with that attitude and change. You know?
Real talk.
What I
Can I add one last thing?
Look here, man. You know, always have to corrupt the leader them, you know. That me notice with the black people, you know. They don't know send on leader corrupt. I want to warn them, man. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
One last thing, right? Ofsted, right? Schools are supposed to be monitored and assessed by Ofsted to make sure they're delivering what they're supposed to be delivering. Where in the Ofsted inspection, right, do they look at? When they look at safeguarding, because that's supposed to be part of the inspection. I would be very interested to know where this fits.
Yeah, man, real good question.
If you're having officers coming in and searching people's children, right, I'm interested to know where that fits in the Ofsted inspectorate. And maybe we need to be using social media smartly and exposing some of these schools where their safeguarding practices are dodgy. Because if a few bad reviews can close a restaurant, maybe a few bad reviews about a school in terms of their safeguarding practices might shut down the school or it might not. But it might be enough to shake things up a bit.
Yeah.
It certainly ought to make Ofsted classify the school, reclassify the school.
Yeah.
Right? Yep.
Yeah.
But the most you're violating people's children, you need to be in special measures. It's not shut down completely.
Remember, I'm tell you. Okay, thank you. What I would say is, we have a saying, man, I can buy a shop. Speaking to the value of having sight. Mind what you do, you might knock out my eye. So we must adopt the same attitude, in terms of the mind that we are allowing to be used in institutions. Because you can't buy a mind. You cannot buy a brain. And when we think of some of the feedback that these institutions openly tell us, i.e., black boys come in slightly advanced of their white peers, only to finish school at 16 well behind.
Exactly.
So we must really value the black mind in terms of our black children. We must value it and not be so careless, man. And just, you're off to school and you're gonna just go learn some fool nursery rhymes which you could have learned online. So, we need to revisit. Prevention is better than cure. Right now, we have a number of children who are traumatized for a number of reasons, not just educationally. But if you have young children now, think prevention. Think prevention. So educate yourself around homeschooling. Form your own networks to do things where you want to educate your children, because that mind is precious. That mind, if it reaches its full potential, is probably going to be one of the minds that's going to help our situation even more, as opposed to ending up in situations where they're traumatized or ending up in their ultimate institution, which is the prison. So that's what I would say from today. Let's treat the mind with more of a precious attitude, more of a precious approach, because it is the most valuable thing that none of us can buy. I can't buy a shop. So, Queen of Compassion, Ebony Harmony, thank you for your contribution today.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, panel.
King of One-Liners again. Great to hear you back.
Yes, thank you very much, people. Thank you, panel. Thank you, listeners. Remember, we are a powerful collective together, and I love my people, dear. I love my people. Peace.
And our queen of analysis, Kindred Spirit.
Thank you, Kush, and thank you, Ebony, for reading out that excerpt earlier and putting Child Q right in the centre of the discussion. A very powerful reminder. Thank you for that.
Yeah, man.
Thanks.
Until the next time, people, walk good.
Stay blessed, family.
Yeah, be blessed all.
Peace and blessings all.
Organize, sit down, reason and talk.
ORT is a Glover Media production.